Hello and welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels and joining me today is triathlete and living kidney donor Hannah Owen. Last year, Hannah donated a kidney to her brother Reese, who has previously been on the podcast, so why not go back and listen to his side of the story as well. Hannah discusses her experience of donating a kidney, her triathlon training and events, and how she regained full fitness again following the operation. Some key messages to take away are that you don't have to know someone in need of a kidney to donate, and to please share your wishes on organ donation with your loved ones so they know if you'd like to donate your organs and save someone else's life. And if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, all the links will be in the show notes. Hannah Owen, welcome to Transplant Take on Sport. How are you doing today?
I'm good, yeah. I'm looking forward to doing this. I've listened to some of your other podcasts that you've done. I've enjoyed them, so.
Good. So before we get going properly, I did say on the last podcast that I would keep you up to date on the symptoms or side effects, if any, of the Oxford vaccine that I had at the time of recording. It's now 4 or 5 days ago. I'm part of a few different kidney groups, transplant groups, cricket team, young adult kidney group, a few patient support groups, transplant games teams. And some people have had no side effects. Some people have had side effects of differing natures. And to be fair, they've all been common side effects. My experience, I had the jab, it was Thursday morning. By the evening, I was a bit shivery, a little bit of a temperature, and a bit tired. But I don't drink, but I've been told that's basically the symptoms of a hangover. And that doesn't put people off drinking. So why should it put you off taking the vaccine? I would happily take those side effects, the very minimal side effects from the vaccine, every time, rather than having the significantly worse symptoms of catching COVID. So from my point of view, all good. I'm fine. Bill Gates isn't controlling me. I've not got any 5G in me. No microchips. It's all good. We're all fine. So if you are offered the vaccine, please do take it, and we can work together as a country to really get going again, get out of the house, and try and get back to normal at some point in the future. So as you've heard, we've got Hannah Owen on today. Hannah is your triathlete, and you're the first living donor on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I'm quite excited about that.
I've interviewed your brother, who you donated to, Reese. So
Yeah.
if anyone hasn't already listened to that, then it's a good listen. So why not go back and listen to that first, and then come on to this one. But for the purposes of this recording, it's going to be done as a standalone. So if there are any crossovers between the two, I do apologise for that. But they are two standalone records and two standalone people.
Yeah, certainly.
So Hannah, we'll start with the sports you do. We'll go to before the donation. You're a swimmer, cyclist, runner for the triathlon. When did you start each one of those?
So it was, I could always swim. Learned when I was younger, and really enjoyed it, but never did it, competitively or anything like that. I was just very average at it. I think in about 2017, I did the Couch to 5K, and I started running 5Ks, doing it quite slowly. Built up to doing a half marathon, but I've never been a fast runner either. And then it came to cycling, and through work, we had like a charity cycle, and it was from Geneva to Lyon in France over 3 days for charity. And for some reason, even though I didn't even own a bike and I could cycle, but I hadn't cycled since I was younger, for some reason I thought, oh, that would be great, let's do that. So I bought a hybrid bike, which is, it's like, it's got road wheels on it, so not a mountain bike, but the handlebars are very like a mountain bike, very straight handlebars rather than a road bike, because it's a lot less intimidating. And I got onto cycling with that for a while. A couple of years later, I progressed and got a road bike. I just absolutely loved it. You could get faster and faster. The more you do it, the faster you'd get. And then I got a time trial bike, which it's almost like evolution of the handlebars. So we've gone from a hybrid to a road bike to a time trial bike. Is this time it has handlebars that go, two handlebars that stretch out in front of you. So when you are riding, you have your arms straight ahead and you're leaned right over to get in a really aerodynamic position. And your wheels are shaped so that you sort of slice through the air and can go really fast.
Have they got those, like, see, in the Olympics where rather than, I think I'm right in saying this, rather than spokes, they're sort of solid hubs, if you like.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm really not going to do it justice by sort of not describing it properly, but if you go to the extreme, you have like a full disc, so you don't have spokes. It is as you explain, a full solid disc, and the idea of that is the max of being really aerodynamic and cutting through the air. So I have somewhere in between that, where sort of the rim is 80 millimeters on the back. So the rim is quite deep, but there are still spokes, but they aren't as long as they would be normally. So that means you go quite fast. But if you had a full disc, you would you're really vulnerable to the wind, because you go really fast, but if the wind catches you, you could really be knocked. Do you see what I mean? Like you could just
Yeah, yeah.
be pushed right over. So I've got somewhere in the middle of those two.
You sound very into your cycling, obviously, with the achievements we'll come on to talk about. Big into all your swimming, cycling, running. Have you always been interested in the long distances, triathlons?
It's really weird how it's come about. So I've not done the longest distance one yet. The longest triathlon I've done is called an Olympic distance, which is 1,500 meter swim, and then the bike is probably about 40k, which I'd prefer to do a bit longer really, but the run is 10k, which I think is what limits me, because I really like the cycling, but I'm not as good as say the running or the swimming. So if I get stronger on those two, I could do a longer triathlon, which is ultimately what I want to do, I think.
I did a bit of research on those, so I'm hoping I'm right with the website I found. Are you looking at like a full triathlon? So was that an Ironman?
Yeah, so the Ironman is sort of a brand, and they do the triathlons that end essentially in a marathon. So it's completely like a full day thing. I would love to do one of those one day, but I think from everything that I've heard people say and coaches, they say, look, at this point, focus on getting faster and doing shorter, and you've got years to then be able to build up to doing an Ironman in a good time, rather than now rushing it and perhaps being a bit slower and doing it.
Yeah, it sounds
Hmm.
very, very, very challenging. Again, I hope I'm right with the research I've done. So you said it ended in the marathon. So you've got a 2.4 mile swim, 112 miles on a bike, and then a marathon to finish off.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, as I say, I haven't done it, but I know a lot of people who have. I think it's brilliant. Mm.
It sounded difficult. 112 miles on a bike.
See, that's a full day out in itself, isn't it? You'd need a sleep after that, let alone doing a run straight after it. And a lot of these events say the swim will be in the sea, for example. So it's not like a straightforward pool swim. Quite often they're fighting against the tide, and then they're going on to do the bike and then the run.
Is it always in that order?
Yes, yeah, it's always that order. Sometimes it's not a if they do different types of events like a duathlon, it might be slightly different. But yeah, traditionally triathlons, it's always swim, bike, run. I think it's for safety as well. So if you swam last, you might be a bit tired. It's a bit more dangerous then.
So how do you transition between the different legs and still manage to stay comfortable? So from the swim to the cycle, you get out the pool or the sea and you're soaking wet, and then obviously transitions are counted in your time, and then straight away you're onto the bike. Can you do that quickly, or is it that how comfortable? Was my first thought. How do you stay
Yeah.
comfortable?
So that it's the fourth discipline that everyone calls it. The fourth discipline is the transition. So the first transition, which is called T1, when you get out of the water, you need to be, especially the distances I've done, which are perhaps shorter, you need to be really comfortable and able to quickly rip off your wetsuit, and you have a tri suit underneath it. So you've already sort of lubed up your ankles and your wrists, so you can just rip it off really fast. Um, you run from you run to an area where your bike is kept, and you will spend a long time before it making sure that your helmet is there with the straps open easily, ready to put on. Your shoes, are nice and loose. You've got talcum powder in them so that it absorbs any water that's dripping off you. Um, you've just prepared this so much in advance that you're just ready to go. Quite often I've practiced it in the back garden before I've done a race, so I just know what I'm going to do in the transition.
So do you always train in that order as well then?
If you do a brick session, they call it. So a brick session would be in training when you would do, um, say, a cycle. You might go on your bike and then you go on a run straight after. So a brick session is 2 sessions back to back. I would try and do those in the order that I would do them in the race. Yeah.
What does your training involve?
So because I mean, as I say, I should probably caveat all this with I am a novice. I'm definitely not elite. Um, but the cycling, a lot of road cycling, I prefer to be out and about. But with with lockdown and with any sort of bad weather, as cyclists, we're lucky to have a software like turbo trainers, and I use the software. Uh, it's called Zwift, but basically you have an avatar, and your bike in the turbo trainer hooks up to your laptop, and it takes you down different worlds, and you can do different workouts. So that's a good way to train. Swimming in the pool, or there's a lot of places around here. There's lakes that you can go to, or swim in the river to practice real outdoor swimming, and then running just as you normally would, as anyone would.
Road running. Have you got a treadmill in the house as well?
No, I would love one, but I'm told there's not enough space. I think you could always make space, but
So the bike you've got in the house, a be first for a lot of people. A bike in the house that isn't used as a clothes horse.
yeah, yeah, that's it. Well, it sort of sits around because they've got the road bike, but then also the time trial bike. So because they've got different sort of a different setup for different purposes, which might sound a bit over the top, but then my partner's got a road bike and he's got a time trial bike as well. So the house isn't that big, and they are sort of, you know, we've got a spare room that is just a room full of, you know, uh, basically bikes and clothes and not really usable for anything else.
Like Halfords.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you find the time to be good at, or that good at three sports?
I think more recently there's been a bit of an evolution of, I think as you could tell when I was nattering on before about the cycling, I really enjoy that the most. And I think I've started to focus a bit more on cycling because I enjoy it more. But then I think, well, if I still want to do triathlons, I have to concentrate on the other two. Um, and they are the things I'm weakest at. At the minute, swimming has completely taken a back seat. I probably don't know how to swim anymore because of the pandemic. But running, I sort of try and concentrate on that because that is something I think it takes a lot of fitness to be able to run. So if you don't run much, it's even harder when you do again.
Yeah.
Every day I would sort of say to myself, right, can I do something today? And just get a lot of sessions in the week really to get it all done.
How do you stay motivated during training and during a race, to be fair? I mean, I've heard that, again, I hope I'm right here, that during a marathon, or like London Marathon, for example, you're not allowed to listen to music. Is that similar with the races that you do?
Yeah, well, every race I've ever done, you're not allowed to have earphones in. But and I think as you say is when you some races, if it's a short race, you might run around a certain circuit where there's music and there's people cheering you on. And at these events, the people that are cheering you on really give you so much gusto and steam. But there is, especially on the bike, there are most of the bike you are on your own, and there's no one to cheer you on because it's quite a big course. But then you'll turn a corner and suddenly there'll be someone there, you know, cheering you that they don't know you. They just are looking for people, and that keeps you going. But I think in your head, you're just thinking, like, especially when on the bike, I'm just trying to put more power down, just going like, come on, in my head.
Does your mind wander as you're going round?
Yeah, definitely. But when you're training, like it would, it would wander. But I think when you're in a race, I'm nearly always sort of thinking about what I'm doing, because if my mind starts to wander when I'm on the bike or the run, I back off the pace a bit. And then when I start thinking you're in a race, I go a bit faster. So I have to keep concentrated, I think, the whole time.
Yeah.
But when you do these Ironmans that you mentioned, I can imagine your mind must go everywhere, perhaps in some dark places as well, because it's so long.
So we mentioned it at the start. You've donated a kidney to your brother Reese, and you mentioned when we recorded that he had fights when he was in stage 5 kidney disease.
Yeah.
Did you keep your training? In fact, this question came up on Instagram. I asked for some listener questions. Um, did you carry on training as usual up until the operation, or did you pull back in the week before?
Just completely as usual. Yeah, I knew there was no events or anything. Actually, no, that's a bit of a lie. I was supposed to last year. Was supposed to go cycling around the Pyrenees in June, which and my operation was in February. So I was thinking, oh my goodness, I need to get my cycling fitness through the roof so that once I've donated, it will drop through the floor. But there was already a good base to bring it back. So I was actually training quite a lot on the bike. But everything else was just to sort of keep fit. And I think 2 weeks before I went to the velodrome in Manchester and had a taster session, cycling on a fixed gear bike around the velodrome like you see on the Olympics.
Yeah,
So I just kept it up as normal, really.
it's good to hear. I think if there are any potential donors listening,
Mm.
they'll be pleased to hear that you just carried on as normal, or actually even more intense, all the way up to the donation. And for those who haven't listened to Reese's one, when did you actually donate?
So it was February the 3rd, 2020. So a year and 5 days ago from when we're recording now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to have a year past. It's gone fast.
It's a good landmark.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think for me, mentally, that was a point where the worries died down a bit because you've hit the year and it's like, right, the risky part, or the most risky part, through, and now, right, you can get on with it. Unfortunately, because of lockdown and the pandemic, not quite been able to get on with it as much as maybe you would both have liked.
Yeah.
But at least I've been saying this loads through the last year. I think I'm guessing, I'm not going to presume, but I'm guessing that Reese might have been the same, and you would have been the same as well. Just glad that it happened when it did, and not a few months later in your case, or a year later in my case.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when he was in hospital for a while afterwards, and I think he was still having to go into hospital when people wearing masks and things like that, and it started to become apparent. And we thought, oh my god, thank God we got it in before any of this happened. And operations were postponed, weren't they, a bit last year? So,
Yeah, my grandmother's been waiting nearly a year for a hip replacement now.
oh gosh,
Hopefully that comes soon.
yeah, definitely. It's no joke, is it? When it would affect the quality of life, I'm sure.
No, when so the donation is coming up, and Reese is told he needs a transplant.
Mm.
Was it a difficult decision to come forward? Did anyone else come forward?
Yeah, when it first happened when I was about 15, it first came to be that he had chronic kidney disease. And at that point, it was almost just like, oh, this is what we'll do now. We'll my my mother, my sister, and my other brother were all tested, but I wasn't allowed to be because I was 15. You had to be 18. And I think I just really wanted to be. I didn't see any downside. It was almost just like what you would do. I want to do it. Um, Luckily, he didn't have to have a transplant until I think it's nearly sort of 10 years later, and it came about again. And they didn't bother giving me any tests because they already had my sister, who would have been a perfect match, perfect tissue, perfect blood, I think. So she was like, right, let's go. And then they gave her some tests, and she couldn't do it because the process that they screen you for as a donor is so thorough. So she couldn't do it. Then my mum went forward, and she couldn't do it. So then they tested me to see what I would be like, um, and I was, not as good as much as they are, but I was all right. It would do the job. And I think, sorry, to come back to your question, it was just like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get it done.
I think my mum was the same. As I think we both said at the same time. If it was the other way around, we do the same.
Yeah, that's it. You haven't been given the opportunity to need to help your mum, but you just would, wouldn't you? It's like
Yeah,
instinct. Yeah.
and obviously, a big decision to make, or it sounds easy from what you've been saying, but emotions aside, were you anxious about going through with it?
Yeah. I think the biggest time I was anxious, I think, was in hospital the night before. And actually, also the build up to it, work was so busy because I was going to be off work for 2 months, and I had to get everything into place to be able to leave work for 2 months, make sure I'd done everything, got everything ready, passed over notes to other people so that they could deal with the workload in my absence. So that was so stressful. And then there's all these last minute checks with the hospital. And then the night before the operation, just sat in the hospital, I just like adrenaline coursing through your veins. Um, and I don't know, because I completely wanted to do it. There was never any doubt in my mind, but I think it's just being scared of being cut open, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it is understandable. It's a big decision to make. We've sort of skimmed over it. Go back. Um, so, for people who might be wondering about the donation process,
Mm.
how was the testing process for you? And for those who don't know, what does that involve?
So there was quite a lot to the testing process, and I can't remember every step. I should have sort of reminded myself, but I know there's initial blood tests that you have, and they test your, I think, your tissue and your blood type if you don't know it, or if they don't have it on file, so you can see if you match. But I mean, even if you don't match, that's not a problem. There are different ways you can go about it. But we were direct, so we had my kidney. Then I think they do like a general health check somewhere along the way, and then you go into hospital for pretty much a full day and have different tests. They inject you with some sort of fluid, if I remember, and it filters through your kidneys, and then you have like an ultrasound scan so they can check how well your kidneys filter out all this stuff, just to know that you've got a decent kidney to give and a decent kidney to keep for yourself. And I think they did perhaps some sort of ultrasound scan. But then after that full day, anyway, there was at least 3 days of having to go back and get different blood tests taken for different things. Pretty rigorous. Oh, and a psychological assessment as well. And you had to
Of
take in
course, yeah.
pictures of me and Reese when we were little to show that we were actually related.
I can remember that. My mum had to take in pictures. Of, I mean, it sounds sort of trivial or almost a strange thing to go through. It took us by surprise when we did it. But obviously, it has to be done for,
Mm.
I think, legal reasons and to make sure you've got the right intentions for doing it and you're not being paid.
Yeah.
Um, I guess this is something else I spoke to Reese about. Do you remember the tissue licensing meeting when you go in a room with someone who's sort of signing the papers to say, right, you can go ahead and donate?
Is that the meeting where they say, where you have to say what you would do if it was unsuccessful, whether you'd have it thrown in the bin or.
I think so, yeah. Because the bit I can remember from my mum being asked,
Mm.
or her coming out saying she was asked, we weren't allowed in the same room while they're asking the questions.
Mm.
But it took us both back a bit because we hadn't really thought about it or put it into words. When they say, I think that is one of the questions. What would you do if it was unsuccessful? But the one that took us back was, or my mum especially, why do you want to donate a kidney to, in your case, Reese, my mum's case,
Mm.
me, and then the other way around, why do you think they're donating to you? Was that difficult to put into words?
I think I do remember sort of being asked that. I mean, I didn't realise that there was the opposite question asked to you and asked to Reese. Why do you think they want to give you a kidney? Um, I think it's being asked that is a bit like, it's almost like a silly question. Of course, yeah,
Yeah,
Why you must know? Yeah.
My mum said she came out and she was asked that question, and she sort of thought about it and thought, "Oh, this is an easy question." He went, "Because he's my son."
Yeah. Care about him?
As for testing vigorous, as you've said, to make sure or minimise the chance of it being unsuccessful,
Mhm.
and that question having to be a reality, which no one really wants. It comes up to transplant day. On the morning before you're about to go, how did that feel?
That was the same feeling. I think my mum was there, and I think she was saying something to me, and my boyfriend was there. And I think he was saying, and they were like passing me you have to have a shower and put a certain liquid on yourself to, I don't know, sanitize yourself. And I think I just remember, like, I just didn't want to. I wanted them to be there, but I just didn't want them to say anything, and I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted to just for it to be, for me to be under and for it to be done. And I remember it was the uh, I think the one of the people in the operating theatre had come down all gowned up, and he said to me, "Right, what operation are you having today?" And I said, "I'm donating a kidney." "Which kidney are you donating?" I said, "I don't know." And I felt such an idiot because I didn't know if it was my left or my right. And he wasn't very happy, and he went and checked, and he's like, "Right, it was your left kidney." So I said, "Okay." And then every step of the way, must have been at least 6 times, someone comes with an iPad. "What's your name?" "Hannah." "What are you doing?" "Donating a kidney." "Which kidney is it?" "Left kidney." "Okay." And it must be like a safeguarding thing. They just ask you so many times. And then someone held my hand as they were. I remember them putting me under. And I'm just thinking, oh yes, that's it. No worries.
Was that sort of quickly out and then none the wiser?
Yeah, it just. I think you just couldn't have that feeling of anxiety anymore. Almost as soon as you were lying down, you think, right, there's nothing more I can do now. It's out of my hands. Nothing can go wrong now. It's going to happen. Although stuff could go wrong, but
We hope not.
yeah, yeah.
Then you came round after the operation. Did all? I mean, it all went smoothly, didn't it?
Yeah, it all went certainly on my end it all went smoothly, and I just remember coming round and just grinning, just being so happy. And my mum said, "Oh, it must be the morphine," and I'm sure it wasn't. I felt like they were treating me like a bit of like an idiot, saying, "Oh, it must be the morphine." She's smiling, and I was thinking, "I'm not." They've told me that he's in the theatre. It's gone in. It's come out of me. It's gone into Reese. I was just thrilled.
Was that a bit of validation or confirmation that you've done your bit well? You've been
Yeah,
successful.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, not that there's never any pressure, but you just know that your bit is done and it's in the hands of these professionals now. There's nothing that could go wrong because I think before our operation had to be moved back a week because they took some bloods and my iron was just slightly low. And I don't eat meat, so I remember thinking, "Oh my God, Hannah, you fool! Your iron is probably just slightly low. It's your fault." And then the operation got postponed a week. So, I think you think, oh, I could mess something up here. So I was just so happy that I hadn't.
Was there the temptation to eat meat again?
Yeah, the coordinator phoned me and said, "Oh, Hannah, I'm ever so sorry, but you're going to have to come to Liverpool again to get another test. Your blood is slightly low, and the surgeon is concerned that maybe he shouldn't do the surgery." And I was like, "Oh no!" I said, "I can get a steak. I'll get I'll eat a steak. I'll do." And she was just like, "That's not going to make a difference, Hannah." That's very naive.
How long were you in hospital for after the transplant?
So I was in for 4 days, and
Really
that was
quick,
the
isn't it?
worst. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's not nice being in hospital, but I sound probably quite patronising saying that because that was the worst bit for me. But that's literally it. That's the worst bit, and then it's uphill from there because obviously there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah, you can just go back to as people do function with one kidney. It's perfectly normal. They live normal lives.
Yeah, that's the best bit. You have that very nice feeling a bit ill in hospital. You know, as you say, you sort of when you lose an organ, you can't walk too well at first. You recover, and then you've recovered, and you're like, "Oh my God, I don't need to." You're perfectly fine without.
Were you and Reese always close growing up?
Yeah, well, there's four of us, and um we've always really got along. There's a bit of an age gap between us, but we've always been close. And I think, as you said earlier, any one of us would have done it for the other one. I think.
Has this brought you even closer then?
Yeah, I think there is. There's just naturally a bit of a thing there, isn't there? Of you know, not that I would say he's got my kidney, but yeah, I think perhaps it has. Yeah.
And have you, in sort of sibling fashion, have you now got a little bit of a one up on Reese? So if ever Reese, if you're ever like, I don't know, um, having a bit of a discussion, you could just pull out the "I gave you a kidney."
Yeah, it's
You do
always
it.
that's it. I think it's going to be a good point of a bit of a joke for years to come. Yeah, always got that over him. Yeah, and it's nice. It's something that at this point now, and once, as you say, the years passed and he's doing well. Once you know that has happened, then you can make light of it, can't you?
Yeah, that's the main
Yeah.
thing. So we'll come on to getting back into sport. Yesterday, I asked for any questions that people might have for you
Mhm.
on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and for future podcasts. If anyone does want to get involved, submit the question. Then, if you follow the podcast account everywhere, Instagram is at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, Facebook at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter, as I said in the last podcast, there was a character limit, so that's at TTOS Pod. The day before each record, I'll put a post up. And if you do have any questions, you can find out who's going on before it's been recorded and send in anything you might want to have asked. So we got a message on Instagram from Diane, who says, she said, we're all right to read this out. She says, "Hi, just seen your tweet about talking to a triathlete who is a living kidney donor. I have a couple of questions." And it's very similar to your position. I'm
Mhm.
training for my first triathlon, should have been last year, and also being tested in 2 weeks to see if I'm a match to donate a kidney to my brother. I'm hoping I'll be able to defer to next year if I am a match, because my brother comes before anything. I'd love to know how long it was before your triathlete was doing any kind of training again. Of course, I know that full medical recovery is vital to getting back to good strength, but would be good to have a rough idea.
Mhm. For me personally, I thought that was quite sweet as well, where she just said, "Oh, my brother comes before anything." That's quite sweet. Um, I think for swimming, that was the first thing I could do. For 4 weeks after it, I could sort of gently swim, and that felt like it was recovering my whole body more than training to swim, really, because I couldn't kick off the wall. Whereas usually, you'd swim, get to the end of 25 meters, and kick off the wall. I had to get to the end and then just push off with with my hands because of the wound. I couldn't kick off. Um, I think by the time your 8 weeks are done, that's probably when you can get to training more than recovering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say.
She goes on further and says, another question, also, if you could ask if there has been any impact on general training since the operation. For example, do they still push themselves as hard, or has their training changed to reduce the strain on the single kidney? Thanks so much. The time of this is incredible.
Honestly. So
Do you want me to go back over again?
yeah, could you just sing the first bit?
So, has there been any impact on general training since the operation? So, do you still push yourself as hard, or have you
Mm.
changed your training a bit?
So I'd say that in terms of when you have an event, if you have it in the near future, don't I wouldn't want it to put too much pressure on yourself because your fitness might not be back that soon. But now, being 1 year on, for quite some time now, I've pushed myself possibly even harder than before the operation, and there's absolutely no difference. I'm more fit now than I was before the operation. So I'd say there's no impact there at all, which is great. For me, the one thing someone said to me before the operation, I said, would there be any impact on my training? And they said, I think it was the surgeon who said, perhaps if you wanted to do an ultra marathon or something like that, to train to that level, you might need more, or you might want to take in more protein, but you can't because you've got one kidney. You can't be taking in excess amounts of protein. So for me, that would be the only way I would be limited. I just think you can push yourself even harder than you can now.
Absolutely, because as they probably said when you were having it done, you can just live a normal life, perfectly healthy with one kidney.
Yeah.
You're both now living with one kidney.
Yeah, that's it. He's got one good one. And then, and I've got mine.
So, thank you to Diane for sending the questions in. If anyone else has any for future podcasts, please do. Even if they're for me, I can answer them in whichever one they come through for. So thanks again, and please do send in any questions. There's no silly questions, as I said on Twitter. Even if it's some sort of sports-based, would you rather? We'll take it. It'll take us down to some sort of route of conversation, and we'll go with it. So how long would you say it was before you got completely full fitness back again?
That's really hard. Yeah, really hard to say. Running, actually, I think was the last one to come back, because sometimes I'd run and then I would just not feel too good. And that was sort of down to the operation. I think maybe it was February. Probably by June, I think I was back to pre-operation. So that's what,
4 months?
about 4 months, yeah.
Not
So
bad.
yeah, I think with what it is, that's huge, really, isn't it? After 4 months to feel how you were beforehand, and then you've made an impact on Reese's life, and you've just recovered. So yeah, that's quite quick, I think.
Yeah, it must be reassuring for you to get back to fitness that quickly, especially being so young when you donated, to know that you're back to normal again and you've got all the rest of your life to still go as you would do had you not donated a kidney.
Yeah, that's it. It's sort of um, it's done, and then I've got that fitness. Uh, yeah, it's almost we make a bit of a joke, say with my sister or something, say, "Oh, that's it, I've got it out of the way, but you've got it to come." Say, Reece, in 20 years or something, or 30, however long the kidney would last. She's next.
Has lockdown had much of an impact on you and your training?
Yeah, the main thing was things that had been cancelled. So I had a trip to Mallorca planned in May, and then in June, there was a trip to the Pyrenees, and they were all going to be training. So the one in Mallorca, I was going to get out on my bike just as much as I could to try and train, really, to be able to do more training in the Pyrenees, which would be more intense. So they were both completely cancelled. So there's a big impact. And then also the fact that all the pools have been closed as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned off air before we came onto this that I probably just lost my ability to to swim, but so is everyone else. So if I did a race at the end of the year or in the middle of the year, um, most other people, unless they've got their own pool, would be in the same position. So it's not
Yeah,
too
you're
bad.
all level.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been able to do any events since you donated, with it being such as, again, everyone's favourite word, an unprecedented year?
It has been, yeah, such an unprecedented year. Um, there were, I was really lucky to get in some training or some events. Sorry, as you said, I did my first time trial series in the summer, and they held it really well. And what it is that was on the time trial bike again, and it was 2 loops of a 7 mile circuit quite locally to me in Chester. So 14 miles altogether, and you just go basically as fast as you can. Obviously, when you come to junctions and stuff, you're being safe, but you go as fast as you can. And actually, with a time trial, I was so scared about the fact that at the beginning, they have to hold onto your saddle and you start clipped it with your feet clipped into your pedals. Um, and then they will let go on one and you go, or they'll let go on zero and you go. And I was scared because if you can imagine, if you've got your feet clipped into your bike, you just feel if you go too far to the right, you'll fall and they won't be able to support your weight. So I was really nervous about that. But actually, because of the pandemic and social distancing, that wasn't a rule. And you actually just start with one foot on the ground. So I was like, this plays to my advantage. And as well as that, I made a note. There was sort of two other events. One was a sprint triathlon, which I was really pleased to have done because it was in September, so 7 months after the operation, and I was sort of, it felt like a tick in my head, like, yes, there's no worries here. I'm completely back to where my fitness was. And it was also an event. It wasn't a race, but it was called a swim run. And basically, it was like a 15-mile loop in the Welsh mountains, and then you run, and then you swim through a lake, and then you run to the next one, and then you swim through that, and that was brilliant.
It does sound fun, and to a certain extent, is it quite relaxing when you're out there and you're running, swimming just in the mountains, nice scenery, quite a peaceful atmosphere?
That's it. Yeah, that particularly was fantastic, and I'd love to do more of that sort of stuff. Just being out there, in the middle of nowhere. And when you're cycling as well, although sometimes there are cars around you and things, it is quite peaceful. And if you go down country lanes and there's sort of no one around, it's just you and your thoughts. It is nice.
Have you got any more, any plans for more events in the future?
So definitely, but nothing that I've signed up to. So there's definitely things I want to do, but I feel like I'm too worried sort of with everything that's gone on, that's going to get cancelled and that sort of thing. So just training in hope that I'm training to be better. So when we can book events, whatever it will be, I'll be better at it. It's my aim at the minute.
It's difficult to plan ahead at the moment, especially.
Yeah, yeah,
One thing I was going to come back to, you sent me some notes before recording. You mentioned the Rafa 500 challenge that you did between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve.
yeah, yeah. That was fantastic. It was The aim is from Christmas Eve to New Year's Eve, you have to cycle. So over 8 days, have to cycle 500 kilometers. Originally, it was a challenge where you had to do it outside, but because of the pandemic, they changed it so you could do some indoors. But I was determined to do it all outside. Um, it makes it even harder because between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, the daylight hours, are really small. So you can't go riding from well, you can go riding from dawn till dusk, but there's not much time to do that. Um, and also it was snowing towards New Year's Eve. It was really icy, so it was a bit of a nightmare. I got loads of winter sort of cycling clothes though, and I did most of it on my own. I think I probably did about 70 kilometers with my partner, but I did the rest of it on my own, and that was such a huge achievement.
Is that something that you'd do again this year, especially with, as you said, not really wanting to plan too far ahead in case it gets cancelled? And if you can do that just outside around where you live,
Yeah, it's a good thing to do really in a pandemic, isn't it? If things get cancelled, that is something you can just do on your own, and you don't have to sign up to it either. It doesn't cost anything, so you could bail out last minute and no one would know because you've not signed up.
but there's something to train towards, something that you've got, even if there's no other events going on.
That's it. I suppose I could take my total time from the last one and sort of try and reduce it this year. And I mean, there is also I was just going to mention if events and things are cancelled, then and the pools are still closed as the weather gets warmer. I was planning to go swimming again. So the River Dee is really close to where I live, and it's sort of a great place to go and go for a swim in there. So if pools are still shut all year, touch wood they're not, but there's always that I can train in
Yeah. Again, it's useful for
these unprecedented times.
yeah. What do you think about open water swimming? Would you rather do that or in the pool?
Yeah, I'd rather swim outside definitely. It's it's more peaceful and it's really nice. But having said that, my technique is not great, so I definitely need to get back into the pool to get it better, so that when I'm swimming outdoors, I'm doing it gracefully, not flapping around.
Is it better training as well, the open water, or better for your training rather? Um, if there's a tide or a current swimming against that.
Yeah, that's it. You're adding something different. Whereas if you were just training in the pool all the time, and then you came to an actual race, there's things like the sun might be in your eyes, and you have to actually breathe the other side, which you might not have practiced in the pool. It's just more of a real life simulation in open water. So I think it's definitely better training.
Absolutely, yeah. It sounds beneficial and sort of. if a lot of the events you do are open water, again, that specific training.
Yeah. Would you ever give it a go, do you think? Open water swimming?
Probably not after the transplant, because I'm one of those that's quite aware of infection and illness. So I'd be very cautious about swallowing any water or that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, you might want to check the water quality if you did, perhaps. Maybe not the River Dee. Somewhere a bit nicer.
maybe a quiet pool.
Yeah.
So, Hannah, there's a few more things that I want to talk about before we come to an end. It's been great so far. I think being the first donor on here, people find that really useful, take a lot from what you've said. And hopefully, if they are faced with the prospect of donating, they'll be more inclined to do it and have the reassurance of your stories to help them along the way. One thing I would say is that you don't have to know someone to donate to them. People
Mhm.
can be altruistic donors and donate to somebody they don't know just through their own goodwill and wanting to help somebody out and get their life back on track, give them a second chance. Are you able to put into words how it feels to be a donor?
Yeah, you get a lot of people giving you a lot of praise, which is really nice, but it can almost sort of make you big headed. You're just doing something that a lot of people would want to do, but have never been given the opportunity to do it to someone they love, or have not thought about being an altruistic donor. Um, it does have a feel good factor. It's not a selfless act at all. It is. You do feel good about it, seeing for me, seeing my brother and knowing he's better for it.
So it feels like you've done something special, important.
Yeah, definitely. And it gives you a bit of appreciation for your own body as well. When you feel a bit rubbish in the hospital bed, and then weeks later you're doing something and you realise how your body bounces back. As a healthy individual, that's great. And then you can give a bit of you to someone else and help them feel like that a bit as well.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a guess of what this answer would be, but would you encourage other people to come forward and donate, even if it's to someone that they don't actually know?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely consider, thinking about it, exploring the avenues, seeing if it is for them. But if someone was in the position and they were thinking about doing it and they asked just my opinion, I would say, yeah, yeah, do it. Ask lots of questions, speak to people, but yeah, do it.
There we go. Straight away, you've heard it there. Why not? I now know a few people who've done it just through receiving transplant myself and meeting other people, meeting donors. They've all said it's fine. They've all recovered, living a normal life. One more question before we go. It's one that I ask everyone who comes on, slightly different today. What's one piece of advice you'd give to a potential living donor?
Ooh. I would say join join like a support group. So there is one that I have on Facebook. Um, I'm not sure the name of it, but it's like a living donor page, and people write there. The idea is it's for donors instead of recipients, and people write on there their woes, their worries, their questions, their experiences, their celebrations, at how well it's gone, if anyone had any issues, so that you fully know what you're getting yourself into, and you know how to prepare. You know what to pack for going to hospital. Just join one of those groups and speak to people. There's loads of support out there.
I think it's a great idea and a great suggestion. If we do find the name of it, I'll try and share it in the show notes when this goes out and try and share it on social media when I post about it. So hopefully we can attract more people to that, bring all the donors together, and
Yeah,
encourage them to talk.
I've actually sorry, I've
Got it?
just got the name up. Is that okay? Can I share it?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go for it.
It's called the Living Donor Support Group UK on Facebook.
There we go. If you are a donor, why not join it? See other people, see them share the stories, and share yours if you want. Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Again, I've said this every week. I'm learning from everyone who comes on, learning more from a donor's point of view. Obviously, I've talked to my mum, but talking to other people does help, and you can understand sort of how it feels to go through that process.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I've listened to as I say, your other ones. I just think it's amazing just to hear people's stories. It's been brilliant. So thank you for setting up the podcast and having me
Thank
on.
you. Thank you. So there we go. My guest today. Thank you again, Hannah Owen. If you enjoy the podcast, then why not tell your friends about it? Give it a follow or a subscribe on whichever place you normally get your podcasts from. If you don't enjoy it, then tell your friends you did anyway. And let's grow our little community, get people involved, try and help people out through the podcast, listening to other people's stories. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, which from the stats I've seen is the most used one, it will mean a lot to me if you could give it 5 stars on there. There has been a review as well, which I might even read out next time. There's been a review on there, 5 stars. So if you do rate your 5 stars and review it, I'll probably read it out on the podcast. Social media, if you want to follow on there as well. We've talked about those earlier, but in case you missed that, Instagram at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, Facebook at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter at TTOS Pod. And if you'd like to email to maybe suggest getting involved, coming on as a guest, if you've got a story to tell, then you can email transplantstakeonsport@gmail.com, and hopefully we can get you involved and add you onto the list. So thanks again to Hannah for coming on the podcast. I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplants Take on Sport.